Our evening program is, of course, Mike Milken interviewing Eike Batista and Boone Pickens. One area I know they will explore is energy. It's a critical one for the world and the Milken Institute. Our Center for Accelerating Energy Solutions takes on the challenge of how we move faster on the path to energy security and energy innovation. And I can't imagine anyone better to lead us on this path than Mike guiding Eike and Boone. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Well, Eike, I'm happy you're with us tonight. Thank you very much. Boone, it's great to see you this evening.
Thank you.
So, we have two individuals that have been very focused on solving problems. You might think of them involved with natural resources, whether it be in Brazil, the United States, or any place else in the world. But many of you remember about 5 or 6 years ago, there was this group that was convened, CEOs, president, government leaders, leading academics, and they were asked, CIA, various economists from around the world, what are the 10 problems for society in the next 50 years? How will they be defined in the first half of the 21st century? And they came up with this list. And that list consisted of democracy and disease and education. And many of you, I'm sure, would have thought many of these would be on that list. And then, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, we had a group of Nobel Prize winners here at the Global Conference, and we gave them this list of these 10, if we could go back just to focus on it for a moment. And they said, no, it's not really 10, it's really 2. And the 2 are energy and education. And as we looked at each of these 10, they wrote down one by one what was really to solve that problem. And so democracy, disease, education, and so on. But 4 of the 10 were solved by energy. Water really is not an issue. There's plenty of water on the planet. Most of it's salt water. And with energy, it can be turned into fresh water. Food, you can really grow food. It's just an energy issue. Environment's really a focus on energy, and so on. And so you might not have thought about it, but these 2 individuals, they read that report. Boone had been in it for a long time, Eike, and they are committed to solving these problems of society. And so before we go any farther, Boone, we made a little video about you that we want to show you. You might not remember any of these things. Now, we are all lucky because if Boone was a little taller, he would have been a professional basketball player. And he had a whole different career. And so he wouldn't have had someone who was constantly prodding our country to do the right thing. So Boone, you were a great basketball player, but you know, as time went on, you had to be a little taller to be a basketball player, or you had to have that 60-inch vertical leap, which I don't think you had. Did you have that leap or no? So let's take a little good look at Boone and get to know him a little better here.
He is an icon of American business, a legendary entrepreneur who grew up in the heart of Oklahoma during the Great Depression. A strong competitive streak sent him to college on a basketball scholarship, and after earning a degree in geology, he turned a $2,500 investment into what would become one of the world's largest independent oil and gas companies, Mesa Petroleum.
I think we've got the best team in the business. I think we're a model oil company. Our average age is 36 years old. I'm 39, and but I've been under a lot of pressure, and so.
In the 1980s, he took the financial world by storm. Today, he is chairman of BP Capital Management and a world-class philanthropist.
I've given away over $700 million.
Indeed, that's right.
And, but my goal is to get to do $1 billion.
A signatory to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's giving pledge, His causes range from healthcare institutions to wild horses, and especially to his beloved alma mater, Oklahoma State University. And at nearly 84 years, he is not slowing down. Long an advocate of clean energy and natural gas as an alternative fuel, the man once called the Oracle of Oil is on a new mission.
I've been an oil man my whole life, but this is one emergency we can't drill our way out of. And I have a plan.
We've got to get our own resources. We have an abundance of natural gas. We have plenty of renewable capacity. We can go to wind. All these things can and will happen.
I've got 1,700,000 people signed up with me. PickensPlan.com, sign up with me. It's all about energy. It's all about energy for us and generations in the future.
Elements of the Pickens plan, like the conversion of heavy-duty vehicles from OPEC diesel to domestic natural gas, found their way into H.R. 1835, or the Nat Gas Act. It achieved rare bipartisan support and passed in the House, but the Senate version failed to reach a filibuster-proof majority.
I'm trying to get energy solved for America, and anything American will work for me. Our own resources are easier to use than anybody can imagine. Thank you.
That's good.
What do you think, Boone?
That's the first time I've seen that.
Well, we wanted to
Very good.
surprise you tonight, Boone. We
You
didn't
did. Thank you.
So before we get into energy and everything and switch over to Eike, tell us a little bit about your basketball career. Not that many people are as knowledgeable about that.
Well, I can put it in 30 seconds. Good high school career, 1 year in college, and they took me off scholarship. They said that I didn't run fast enough to scatter leaves.
Now, let me try to understand that, Boone. What college took you off scholarship?
Texas A&M,
Okay, and what college have you been donating money to?
Oklahoma State. Texas A&M gave their 10, it was a spoof, but they gave their 10 biggest mistakes over the history of the school. I was number 3, taking Boone Pickens off a $25 a month scholarship.
And Boone, how much have you given to Oklahoma State?
It's over $500 million.
Okay. So, Eike, it's great to have you here. And we prepared a short little video about yourself, so let's take a look at that one, too.
I'm worried.
Brazilian entrepreneur Eike Batista started the EBX Group in 1983 with a single gold mine deep in the Amazon. By the year 2000, Batista was operating 8 gold mines in Brazil and Canada, a silver mine in Chile, and 3 iron ore mines in Brazil.
Somehow I have a pact with Mother Nature because so I drill and I find things.
Now, do you have good geologists? Have you got a good stick? What is your strategy? Because many people in the audience would also like to find things.
From 2011 to 2012, the EBX Group will invest $15.5 billion in Brazil, generating 20,000 jobs in the construction and operation of its enterprises.
We apply something in our company that we call human capitalism. When I build a superport like that, of course I'm going to influence the fishermen close to the port. Of course I'm going to influence the life of the neighboring cities. We go in with people to study the needs of everybody. If it's hospitals, if it's schools, we go there and invest the money before. If you don't have the money to pay for the humane capitalism, don't even develop anything.
Batista's EBX Group supports nearly 160 socio-environmental initiatives in Brazil, including the preservation of 3 national parks, 5 private natural heritage reserves, and the Marique Ecological Corridor in Rio de Janeiro, one of Brazil's largest Atlantic forest restoration projects. Batista is currently raising money to expand his oil and mining business in Brazil and to further diversify away from commodities. In just the last 6 weeks, he sold a $2 billion stake in EBX to the investment arm of the Abu Dhabi government and a $1 billion interest in his technology business to IBM.
I have to compete with Mr. Slim. You know, I don't know if I'm going to pass him on the right or the left side, but I'm going to pass him.
But Batista's primary goal is to leave a legacy to the country he loves.
I want to be the world's biggest philanthropist. This is my country, and I'm going to make it work for my children.
So, Eike, we talk a lot at the Milken Institute in our global conference about human capital, social capital, and I think we saw a lot in that picture. And one of the things that I think you have done is you've really lifted a country in many people's eyes from that standpoint. And as we think about Brazil today, I'd like you to maybe just spend a few minutes talking about your country to the group tonight, if you would.
Yeah. Well, in relation to the philanthropy, I mean, Americans are gracious with its people. Boone just showed how much you give back to society. Brazilians, maybe because we lived for so many years in financial distress, basically between 84 and 97, we did everything wrong that the country could do wrong. Now, thanks God, in 97, we did a bank reform. We did the TARP in 97. So, you know, when people say that Brazil is the country of the future, I would say Brazil is the country of the future since 97. Because since then, we have adult supervision of our financial system, and the Central Bank of Brazil knows the outstanding position of every hedge position, over-the-counter exposures, total indebtedness of companies, and we manage today a totally unleveraged economy. A country with 192 million people. President Lula, in his last 8 years, so 2 terms, managed to bring 35 million Brazilians into the middle class. So we are now 100 million Brazilians in the middle class, and we have probably in the next decade another 50 million people to add to this consumer society. So Brazil is a country that respects contracts. I think if you see the picture of President Dilma at my Superport last...
Why don't we take a look at maybe another video here? You know, if we step back for a moment, it's hard to keep up with Eike. On July 27, 2012, Eike announced he's going to invest $1 billion to build a new factory in Brazil. So we had a chance to read that in the Wall Street Journal. Pointed out that he's going to invest $50 billion in Brazil over the next decade. And if we step back and look at the March announcement when Abu Dhabi invested a couple $2 billion, why don't you talk about that before we get to the video? How did you convince and decide this partnership with Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, the Abu Dhabians, they spent almost a year in my office going through 18,000 documents. Yes, they're very thorough, and I love to be audited. It's really a way to, and maybe the way why we have created so much wealth, and maybe the way we managed to raise so much money to develop our projects. Transparency, it's all about transparency. So after this almost 1 year, going through all this massive due diligence, they realized that, you know, the EBX Group is basically, we are a core of 1,000 engineers, people who build the world, a new world, an efficient world, very powerful and strong in finding oil, finding mineral resources, and putting them into production. Because you may have the best ideas, if you don't execute, you know, blah, blah, blah. So they realized that, you know, we have concepts, we have ideas, we have great assets, which are Brazilian oil fields, and we execute. So that's why we ended up, closing the deal after a year, and they bought for $2 billion, 5.63% of my holding. And for us, it was a way to basically have another stamp of approval by as I said before, nothing better than to be audited by a group that is so diligent.
That might know a little bit about the energy business themselves, right?
They do. They really understand oil, and they were impressed of what they saw in our company.
Tell us a little bit about the IBM transaction.
The IBM transaction? Well, IBM, they implemented in Rio, they have this intelligent city concept for intelligent solutions. And when they realized that our group of 6 listed companies were big in oil, big in logistics, big in mining, gas.
Could we put up the slide showing the companies under the EBX that we have here?
Yeah. So when they realized, the different companies, when they realized that we were so diversified and so big, I think we're the only group in the world that is so, holistically speaking, owns oil fields, owns the production of the oil-producing vessels, super ports, own our own logistics to ship our iron ore to the world. We said, listen, let's look for the best company in the world to bring us intelligent solutions. So, we have to obviously manage gigantic amount of data, and we use SAP, German software, but IBM, we signed $1 billion contract for the next 10 years to basically put all these intelligent solutions in place.
Well, let's take a look at the slide. You just put it back up here for a moment, because I want everyone in the room to think, well, if you want to be in the mining business, you can partner with MMX, and if you want to be in logistics, you can partner with LX, and of course, those of you who want to increase your exposure to the catering business, you can partake in that, and entertainment business, high tech, gold mining, and real estate, and coal mining and offshore, and oil and gas. So there's many opportunities, Eike, but as I see it, if you sold Abu Dhabi a piece of EBX, they're going to participate in the top 6. Is that correct?
No, they participate in all of it, except my private things. I mean, my house and this is all private.
One of the things we've often asked ourselves at the Institute is, when is the wake-up call? When do you see the challenge or the change? And for us here in the United States, 1973 and 1974 are very vivid in both Boone's and my mind. During that period of time, you had this crisis that occurred, and here's the pictures from 1974. You can see that VW there, but you couldn't get gas based on your license plate on certain days, and certain days you couldn't get it. You had to wait in line, and in many places you couldn't get more than 10 gallons per customer. And so there was this wake-up call in 1974 that maybe we should use technology, maybe we should get our house in order, maybe deal with this issue back here in 1974. And we have showed it to you at the global conference over the years, but each president of the United States said it was a call to action. And the most emotional call to action was President Carter. And what he said, and in many ways Boone has said this for decades, it's a difficult effort. It's the moral equivalent of a war, except instead of destroying your building, and as Boone spent a number of years here trying to point us in the right direction, just the understanding of shipping hundreds of billions of dollars overseas, if we stepped up. And here was President Carter's message that night in the late 1970s.
Setting a clear goal for the energy policy of the United States. Beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977. Never.
So, unfortunately, we didn't respond to that effort, and the question is, would the world have been different? We've talked about the fact that the United States has invested over $7 trillion in the Gulf since that period of time, including aircraft carriers, war and terrorism, homeland security, etc. And all of us could ask ourselves, had we responded, what would the world have been like today? In fact, when we step back and look at some of the alternatives that are proposed today, whether it be shale or whether it be natural gas and all these different alternatives that we talk about today, geothermal, etc., maybe 8 or 9 different ways of looking at dealing with the energy problem, it's really not new. And in fact, if we look at this, if you look at what Fortune magazine had tried to tell us about back then, they listed these issues, these 8 different things we talk a great deal about today, back in those days. And so this issue of expanded natural gas, hydropower, was in Fortune magazine, this group, tidal waves, not last week, not last year, but this is from Fortune magazine, 1938. And so these are not necessarily new ideas. Boone was focused on this in 1938. Not all of us were back then, but
I was playing basketball then.
but the real question is it new? In fact, this concept of natural gas for cars, here's another picture from 1938 Fortune magazine at the time. So we think that because we bring out an idea, it was in 1939, for example, that we put out the first report that there might be some link between smoking and your health. But in 1986, Marlboro was still the most valuable brand in the world. So here in 1938, Fortune magazine laid out a potential solution. And Boone, you have probably invested more money than any person in history to try to point the United States in the right direction. You've gone on television, you've spent enormous time in Washington, traveling the country, millions of people supporting the Pickens plan. As you reflect back on this, whether it was 74, whether it was 1938, whether it's your more recent efforts, why has the country been so slow to respond?
2 reasons. 1, we had cheap gasoline. 2, lack of leadership. That's it. But you think back, 74, when President Carter was speaking a minute ago, I think that was 77, and he was struggling with it, didn't have a solution, and didn't pursue it far enough. But you think back, had he solved that problem in 77, I can tell you one thing that wouldn't happen. We wouldn't have had 6,000 people killed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and 31,000 injured. That for sure would not have happened because we have the resources in this country and should never have been dependent on OPEC oil.
I think you more than any person I think you, Boone, more than any person I can recall in our country, launched an individual initiative to try to get us pointed in the right direction. What lessons have you learned that you could share with us tonight, whether it's for natural gas or any other causes that some of us might be focused on? What lessons have you learned from that experience?
Well, I actually started on the plan in 1988. In 88, and because I could see we had a fuel that was cleaner, cheaper, domestic, and abundant. But in 88, and I thought I could do something in 3 years. Here I am, 2012, and I still haven't gotten there. But I have stayed in and kept grinding on the problem getting off of imported oil from the wrong people, the enemy. And again, OPEC, we're fine with oil from Canada and Mexico, but OPEC oil is just totally disastrous for us because part of the money we pay for the oil goes in the hands of the Taliban. Now that's a fact. That's not just some idea that I have. And it just, we're fools to continue to do this. And the other day in Washington, somebody said, you asked me the question, what would I, give me the question again. That I would,
One, I think, what advice would you give for
Okay.
us? And maybe also, Boone, what would you have done differently looking back over 25 years? What would you have done differently? Or what could you have done?
well, on the advice, I think it probably was a mistake that I went to Washington. That's sad.
Should you have gone
Sad.
straight to the American people?
Should have gone to the American people and should have gone to the states. I now have 13 states signed up with me. I still don't have Washington signed up for anything. And, but we have voted on an amendment to put on the transportation bill, and this occurred a month ago. And we got 51 votes for, 47 against, and we lost. Now that Washington's the only place 51-47 won't win. It will in the Big 12, Southeast, every place else it wins. Washington, you have to have 60 votes. And that's because Washington is so damn weak that they can't believe 51 votes doesn't win. So they vote to see this amendment first. The first vote was to decide whether natural gas for heavy-duty trucks was germane to the transportation bill. Trucks, transportation bill, they voted it was not germane. That means you have to have 60 votes to win, which tells you how damn weak they are. They have to come up with something that is stupid, that you have to have 60 votes, and it doesn't make sense. And we didn't get 60, but believe it or not, we're going to get another chance, and I think it will pass. The interesting part of it is, because of the abundance of natural gas and the price of natural gas, you actually don't even need Washington. It's going to happen anyway. So then you say, well, why do you even fool with it? Well, one, no question, I don't want to be at this, work as hard as I have and spent the money and then scratch a loser's ass. So,
Eike, let's turn to you for a couple of minutes.
I just don't like to lose, for one thing. And I know I'm going a little bit long probably on the response, but anyway, it's going to happen. We're going to use our own resources in America. It'll all happen because the fuel is so cheap. Truckers are saving $1.50 to $2 a gallon. That's a lot for somebody using 20,000, 30,000 gallons a year. You save $2 a gallon, you saved one hell of a lot of money. So it's moving to it. So why do I even bother to go to Washington? Because if we pass this, it would give a tax credit to the truckers of $24,000 a truck. That's the incremental cost of going from diesel to natural gas. Then there's a pay-for in it, simple pay-for. It's paid for by the users, just like a toll road. If you use it, you pay for it. So here, it's paid for. It's a 5-year and sunset out and gone, over with, all of it. The whole thing will be gone. So why are you even doing it? Because with that, and with the government going along with it, we could cut the time to make the conversion of the trucks down from 8 years to probably 4 or 5 years. And that is big because it's hundreds of thousands of jobs, and you're cutting the trade deficit substantially. And it's all about us Americans. It's about, for our country. And I'll be damned, those guys up there can't get this thing passed.
Eike,
I'll tell you, I'm retiring in Washington after this. I don't think I'll ever go back up there again. Once this is over with, I'm through with that deal.
Boone. One thing I know is you're never retiring. That's one thing I know.
I know, but I'm retiring from Washington. Unless they elect me president, I will go back.
Fine. So Eike, Boone has talked about leadership as one of the reasons we didn't respond. And we've been very focused on leadership in the terms of social capital. And as you pointed out, Brazil was very volatile for a long period of time. It was kind of a new Brazil beginning in 1997. And when we think about social capital, it's education, it's healthcare, it's police, it's fire, sense of neighborhood property rights, creditor rights. And we've often talked, you and I, about your neighbor, Argentina, where they full-time try to destroy social capital. It's not part-time. They're focused on all these things. Recently, if you remember, they banned foreign books because there's too much lead in the ink coming into the country from that standpoint. But you've spoken about the leadership in Brazil, and the president has come to visit you and visit some of your latest finds. I know we have a video. You want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah. Can we show the video?
Sure. Let's take a look at that video.
Yeah, okay. Our first oil in Brazil, celebrated by our president, was a major event for Brazil because all the foreign companies, the Exxons, the Chevrons, they know now that they're welcome to Brazil to participate in this massive oil potential. Not only the oil producing companies, but also the GEs and the Halliburtons, the Baker Hughes, the National Oil Varcos, that are coming to Brazil to build out the industry because to comply with Brazilian national rules. So having the president, come to my port, to my super port, was just, a stamp of Brazil is different. And maybe the video can show.
Fine. Before we start the video, Eike, everyone here that wants to look for natural resources in Brazil, if we're having problems, can we come and talk to you for guidance on the direction to go, or someone working for you?
I think you should.
Just checking for you there. Okay, let's take a look at that video.
A united team with the talent to discover and the ability to deliver. Prepared to drill into the volcanoes in the south of the Campos Basin when no one else believed there was any oil to be found. 90 wells drilled in only 3 years of exploration, the largest drilling campaign in Brazil. Partners with more than 100 companies around the world. 6,000 highly qualified professionals united in an extremely ambitious operation. The saga of a historic moment. A private sector Brazilian company which has gone where no other company dared to go. "80 kilometers off the coast of Rio de Janeiro, under 130 meters of water. A well almost 4,000 meters deep, with 1,000 meters of horizontal drilling. This is the beginning of OGX's first oil. A world record, 25 months from discovery to production, opening a new frontier in the sector. The saga of Waimea is only the beginning of a story which will transform the economic scenario of Brazil, the start of an era of greater competitiveness, of technology transfer, of thousands of new jobs, and the creation of wealth for many generations of Brazilians.
I think, without your great American companies like GEs that supply us the Christmas trees underwater, and so many other, as I mentioned before, we would not be able to do this. So you should be proud of your great American companies.
So tell us a little bit about, thank you, Eike. Tell us a little bit about the president of Brazil.
Yeah, you know, as I said, you know, leadership is part of building a nation, and you know, we had extremely luck for the last almost 17 years now. 8 years of Fernando Henrique, of president before Lula, who basically created the framework for this new Brazil. Then a Lula that surprised not only the international community, but even us Brazilians, because he embraced all of us. He embraced the bankers, the rich Brazilians, the entrepreneurs, you know, that create the country, and the whole country. So 8 years in which I said before, he brought 35 million Brazilians into the middle class, so one Canada, just to put it in perspective. And now with Dilma, you know, who was...
Tell us a little bit about her background before
Yes.
becoming president.
She was the Minister of Mines under his presidency, and so participated obviously in the last 8 years. And today, you know, I think we are fortunate again to have this incredible lady that understands the technical issues, understands that how important it is to have foreign capital and foreign knowledge, you know, to explore the vast resources of our Brazilian offshore oil. And this picture that happened last Thursday is really a game changer, because she's endorsing all what I just said, you know, welcoming foreign investment, welcoming all the foreign companies that are investing in Brazil to participate in this really trillion-dollar oil story. You know, the offshore oil discoveries, 100 billion barrels of oil. In shallow waters, we're talking about $16 lifting cost oil, which is, Boone, very sexy.
$15 lifting cost?
Uh-huh.
I like it.
I like it too.
Let's take a look back, if we could, I think it's slide 31, of the recessions and the difficulty as oil spiked. So when we take a look at oil, we can see here it ran up to about $40 back in 1979, and we were sitting here talking about whether it's going to $100 a barrel. By 1986, it had gone from 40 to 10 rather than from 40 to 100. And as you look at this volatility of oil, Boone and Eike, what would you attribute this to, this volatility that's occurred over this period of time? If we could just leave that slide up a little bit. Boone?
What would I attribute to?
In other words, we went to 40, we went down to 10, and obviously that volatility, as you remember, it shut down a lot of activities here in this country on shale or other alternative technologies during that period of time that occurred. So we can see here we actually didn't get back up
No, we
to the
stayed
price.
pretty
It
flat.
took more than 20 years to get back to the price, and not in adjusted dollars, but in absolute dollars.
My response? That you're looking at a very simple commodity curve. I mean, that's the supply and that's the demand. So it was very balanced.
We had plenty of time here to maybe take action during that period of time.
Sure, when you got the wake-up call in 73, 74, you should have gone to work on it. But the irony of the whole thing is that we now have resources to take care of the problem. That time has passed, and we can't do anything about it, okay? Now, had we done something about it, say, by 1980, we would have been producing our oil and gas reserves for 30 years at that point. Today, 32 years.
Now,
That's gone. Okay, those reserves are still in the ground. They're waiting there for us. As I get closer to the end than the beginning.
What is the end? What do you mean end?
Well,
all this work we're doing on medical research, you know, we had some.
Let me tell you, the closer I get to the end than I was at the beginning, I become more and more attuned to divine intervention. And divine intervention could have actually occurred here had we produced that and had not had the knowledge and the opportunity we have now. That I think it's an unbelievable situation for our country. Here we sit deep in debt, and we have a solution. The solution is use your own resources and build an economy on the back of cheap energy. The cheapest energy in the world today is in the United States. We have the cheapest oil by 10%. We have 20%, 15%, and we have the cheapest natural gas. It's 20%, for instance. Today, $2, Beijing 16, Mideast 15, Europe 13. I mean, we're overwhelmed with the best hydrocarbon that you can have at the cheapest in the world, and gasoline is half of what Europe is. And we're going around crying about $4 gasoline, and we have the cheapest energy in the world.
In fact, I think, Boone, with technology today, the U.S. would now have an energy reserves probably the most of any country in the world when you consider shale, coal, etc. So I think the point you're making is we're there.
Yeah, but who is it that gave us this opportunity? Okay, now you've got an industry that has paid off in this country. They've done a very good job for us. And what we have in the White House that says they're making too much money, they should be taxed. It's a, oil industry, and right immediately in the same sentence, they should be taxed more. Well, they're paying the same tax as everybody else is. We all use the same manufacturing companies, all basically have the same code to adhere to. And at one time I testified for a House committee by Jake Pickle. This is 30 years ago. And he asked me, it was on taxation, he said, Mr. Pickens, you were one of the highest paid executives in America last year. Do you feel that you paid appropriate taxes? I said, are you questioning whether I have a faulty tax return or what? He said, no, do you feel comfortable with what you've done? I said, sure I did. I said, I made a lot of money, I paid a lot of taxes and all. He said, well, did you pay a significant amount of taxes or insignificant? And I knew then he knew what my tax return was. And I said, I would say insignificant. And he said, do you feel comfortable about that? I said, I deferred taxes from one year to the next. He said, but do you feel bad about that? I said, not really. I said, you've examined my tax return, and I'm going by the very rules you guys set up, and you're questioning whether. Now we're at the same point. In 2012, we have a president that says, you're not paying your fair share. And wait a minute, I'm 84 years old. Since I was 70 years old, I paid $665 million worth of taxes, and I'm not paying my fair share. What in the hell is my fair share? Good point, wasn't it? On top of that, I employ 150 people directly and several thousand indirectly. So
Eike, let's take a look at that volatility of oil that we had up before, and let's talk about what that volatility looked like to you. You were willing to take risks when others weren't. You were willing to invest, and you see here you have a commodity that went nowhere for more than 20 years, except maybe down. What were you thinking about why others were standing on the sideline?
Well, if you look at the world as a whole, I think after the Cold War, countries like Kazakhstan open up, and so countries that had resources to be explored started to be explored. So you had oil coming into the market. It happens that today the world is really mapped. The big oil fields, you probably heard the term peak oil. I mean, I believe in peak oil for the simple reason that the big, giant, mega giant oil fields have been tapped and the production is going down. So there's some few frontiers that are, have big oil, like Venezuela, but for obvious reasons, it's quite difficult to go and do business in Venezuela. Brazil is a big new frontier, but we will not cope with the needs the energy needs that the world has, to comply with the next 3 billion people that are increasing their carbon footprint, their fossil fuel footprint. So, in essence, that's it. You have to look at the whole from the top, maybe from an Apollo spacecraft, and you see that the big fields, the low-cost fields, have been tapped, and the production is going down. And the world has to do an immense effort to basically keep up and replacing the 80 billion barrels of oil that are being extracted every year. So, if you look at the world as a whole, like I think we do, we're coming to the point where this large new population that is coming into the consumer world needs this energy. And there are few new provinces left in the world where politically, look what happened in Argentina, a rich country. My father always used to say that Argentina, what are the worst car drivers in the world? Not to offend anybody. What are they, Boones? The worst car drivers in America?
I didn't hear you.
Which are the worst car drivers in America?
The worst car drivers.
The worst?
Car drivers. Car drivers?
You mean the worst driver?
Yeah, what are they?
You think I'm going to say women, but I'm not.
Women. I'm not going to offend women. Well, in Brazil, I'm not going to say that. Yeah. Well, in Brazil, we think that the Egyptians are the worst car drivers in the world. So we like to say that Argentina has always been a Rolls Royce driven by Egyptian chauffeurs.
The most dangerous thing in the world, I remember they used to say, were two things. I won't say one of them. Second one was an Italian with a machine gun. But that goes back to World War I.
Okay.
So I think in closing tonight,
Is that bad?
in closing tonight, we have two young entrepreneurs who have taken risks when others would not. They've obviously benefited, and Boone's knowledge of energy pales with almost all of us in this country. His experience, his frustrations, his dealing with government, and his wisdom in those areas. Boone is an entrepreneur for a lifetime. What advice would you give the people in the audience if they wanted to go into the natural resource industry?
You've got the fabulous opportunity in the United States that you're sitting here with the energy market out of balance, and it's out of balance in your favor. You're sitting here with $2 natural gas. You can't have a commodity that is $2 in one part of the world and $13 to $16. This summer you'll see $20 natural gas in Japan. So what an opportunity here to capitalize on this. And I used to speak to geology students and petroleum engineering students in universities, and 10 years ago, I hated to take those requests to speak to them because I couldn't say you're in the right career. You have picked it, and you're going to have a fabulous life. I couldn't say that to them. All I could say is you're going to have to work hard, and you're going to have to be smarter than the rest of the guys out there, or it's going to be a difficult time. Let me tell you, you don't have to be that smart now. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, it's an opportunity in this business, and I'm going to make a lot of money out of it because I know the business. And
are you willing to take a couple of people as partners, Boone, along with you tonight?
I'll take all those first 10 tables there.
Okay. Eike, what about yourself? You've been in different countries around the world. You've been in the Amazon. You've been in difficult situations. You've been fabulously successful in identifying and executing on natural resources, and uniquely you've built a community, cities, schools, etc. What advice would you give? Is Brazil still the place to go?
Yes, we have probably a very clear path to at least 10-year growth, consistent growth at around 4.5% to 5.5% a year. Very little indebtedness in the country. You know, only we have debt to GDP 37%. We're generating surpluses. We're probably going to 35, which is the opposite of Europe. Only 5% of GDP are mortgages, so it shows you how little leveraged the country really is. And yes, I mean, and all the big American S&P 500 companies are really down in Brazil, helping increase the profit streams here, probably at the 60% rate. Brazil is part of this of the emerging world, with maybe one big difference. We are the most Western of all the BRIC countries. You know, I think China are really for the Chinese today. India are for the Indians, Russia for the Russians. Brazil is for everybody. So you're all welcome.
Well, Eike, we're looking forward to you hosting all of us for the Olympics and the World Cup, and thank you very much, and thank you, Boone, tonight.
A problem with hotels.
Thank you, Boone.
Sure.
Thank you all. Have a great evening. We'll see many of you at late night.